Hope all of you are having a fantastic day wherever you may be across this great country or this great land. And, Dub, had you heard that, what I was just talking about, Canada, the fact that you might not be able to, they haven't figured out how they're going to do the NHL playoffs.
Yeah, that seems like a huge issue, to say the least.
Right?
I mean, because I knew that they were separating the divisions and such to where all the Canadian teams would play the regular season all in Canada. But I just kind of assumed they would figure it out for the playoffs. I figured they would have enough time with the months and months of the regular season to figure out the playoff scenarios, but apparently they haven't. And this could be a humongous issue in the coming weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of an international it's an international incident, I guess you could say, because I think what probably would end up having to happen is whoever the Canadian team to win their competition, win basically Canada's title, right? Because there's 4 Canadian teams in their Canadian division. They would have to probably come to America, but then they wouldn't be able to have any sort of home ice advantage because Canada is insisting that anyone who comes across the border has to quarantine for 2 weeks. I mean, it's a crazy setup. And so if that actually takes place, then you obviously can't continue the playoff. You can't go back and forth. So I don't know what the resolution is going to be unless it's similar to what's happened with the Blue Jays and with the Raptors, where you just have to stay in America the whole season because you can't go back and forth across the line, across the border. And so if that ends up happening, that's a tremendous disadvantage for the Canadian team because effectively they have to go on the road for the final couple of rounds of the Stanley Cup playoffs, right? So what they will do is get to 4. Every one of these little pods will have a team to advance, and one of those teams, we know one of the final 4 will be a Canadian team. But then when you get into that final 4, in theory, the Canadian team may have to come to the United States and stay. And then what do they do? They play every game on the road? That doesn't seem very fair, particularly because many of these different places are going to have, especially in the United States, if the data continues to be as robust in terms of falling cases and the CDC changing the rules and everything else, if that data is accurate, then some of these NHL arenas, particularly down in Florida and in Nashville, if some of these teams, Charlotte, continue to win, they're going to have pretty big home ice advantages. So would the Canadian team just play in a neutral site venue with no crowd at all present? This is a big deal, especially in Canada where the pursuit of the Stanley Cup is such a massive national story. They haven't won the Stanley Cup and brought it back to Canada in so long. If you end up in a scenario where the team that ends up representing Canada isn't able to play in front of any fans, I wonder on some level whether Canadians are just going to throw up their hands and say, we have got to resolve this situation because we are not going to allow it to end up in a scenario where we're not able to play in front of home fans and everybody else gets to play in front of home fans.
Well, and how about this? What if they win the damn thing? They come back to Canada, they can't celebrate, they have to sit in their rooms for 2 weeks. That's not going to fly for those people.
That's really funny, too.
They go to America, they win their first Stanley Cup in a generation, essentially.
Yes.
And they have to go home and quarantine for 2 weeks. That's not happening.
They would go to Vegas, I imagine. But, yeah, it would be really funny. They can't have a celebration in any way. They can't. I mean, maybe Canada is pretty far behind us in terms of opening up in their country. I mean, in all honesty, and this is maybe something I can mention at the top of the second hour, one of the benefits that we have in America is our federal system. So federalism, we have 50 different states, and so we effectively have 50 different state laboratories. And so the state of Texas and the state of California can make different decisions. And over time, we can be like, hey, this decision made more sense. Let's use this as a laboratory. And so what you've ended up with is the 4 biggest states in the country, Texas and Florida, were not very restrictive when it came to COVID. New York and California were very restrictive when it came to COVID. And you know what the outcome has been? the less restrictive measures of Texas and of Florida have yielded a better result than the incredibly restrictive measures of New York and California. And we know that because we have all the data laboratory basically to be able to look at from a federalism perspective. Well, if we were all doing the exact same thing and it was incredibly restrictive, that's what Canada's doing. Again, the Raptors haven't even been playing in Canada. Neither are the Blue Jays right now. So this is a story worth putting a pin in. I know we actually have a lot of people in Canada who listen. I mean, you guys got to be pulling your hair out when you see how much more open the United States is than what's going on in Canada, but also when you're pursuing the Stanley Cup and you haven't won it in a generation.